The Galactic Survey Corps ship Eternal Discovery drifted at the edge of an unremarkable yellow star system. The massive vessel's engines hummed quietly as it performed its routine cataloging mission. For the crew, this was just another day mapping the endless void of space. Commander Vex stood on the bridge, his tall, thin frame casting a long shadow across the command deck. His species had evolved on a world with minimal gravity, giving him a height that would seem strange to most humans. He rubbed his large eyes, tired after weeks of scanning lifeless planets. "Begin scans of the third planet," he ordered, his voice flat from boredom. Officer Trill nodded and activated the ship's powerful sensors. Data began flowing across the screens as the ship's computers analyzed the small blue-green world. Trill was young for his position, his scale still bright blue, marking him as barely into adulthood. His eyes widened as the first readings came in. "Sir," he said, "there must be a malfunction in the sensors." Vex moved to Trill's station and looked at the readings. His posture stiffened as he processed what he was seeing. Run a diagnostic and scan again. The crew worked quickly, recalibrating the sensors and running new scans. The bridge fell silent as everyone focused on their tasks. Minutes stretched into an hour as they checked and double-checked their equipment. "Sir," Trill finally reported, "all systems are functioning correctly. The readings are accurate." Vex stared at the main view screen, which now displayed a close-up image of the third planet. Blue oceans covered most of its surface, with green and brown landmasses scattered across it. White clouds swirled in its atmosphere. It looked peaceful from a distance. The data told a different story. "This can't be right," Vex muttered. "The atmospheric composition contains oxygen at 21%. Oxygen at that concentration is highly corrosive," the science officer noted. "It would cause most metals to rust and organic tissue to burn. The radiation levels from the star are also excessive," Trill added. "And look at these temperature readings. Parts of the planet swing from freezing to boiling regularly." Vex tapped his long fingers on the console. "What's the tectonic activity rating?" "Off the charts, sir. The entire crust of the planet is broken into pieces that move constantly. There are active volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis. And yet," Vex said quietly, "I'm seeing signs of civilization." The bridge crew fell silent again as they processed this information. The view screen shifted to show the night side of the planet, where countless tiny lights marked the presence of cities. "The computer is having trouble assigning a classification," Trill said. "It's beyond the standard scale." "What's the highest classification in our system?" Vex asked. "Class 12, sir. That's for planets considered completely uninhabitable." Vex watched as the computer created a new entry in its database. The words appeared on the screen. "CLS 15 DEK. ORL." "Sir," Trill said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we're detecting artificial satellites, radio signals, and, sir, they're transmitting information." He paused, listening to his earpiece. "They call their planet Earth." "What about the life forms?" Vex asked. "Are they intelligent?" "Yes, sir. The dominant species calls themselves humans. They appear to be carbon-based, water-dependent organisms. Their bodies contain mostly water, sir. They breathe the oxygen." Vex shook his head in disbelief. Nothing should be able to survive in those conditions, let alone build a civilization. On the view screen, Earth continued its slow rotation, oblivious to the astonished aliens watching it. Sunlight crept across its surface, revealing more details of the blue planet that seemed both beautiful and terrifying. "Send a message to Central Command," Vex ordered. "Tell them we've discovered something impossible." 6 months after the discovery, the diplomatic vessel Unity approached Earth orbit. The sleek ship moved slowly, its silver hull reflecting the sunlight as it positioned itself above the blue planet. Inside, the alien delegation made final preparations for humanity's first official contact with galactic civilization. Ambassador Locke stood before a mirror, examining his protective suit. The transparent helmet showed his gray face with its 4 eyes blinking nervously. His species evolved on a world with minimal oxygen and low radiation. Earth's environment would kill him in minutes without protection. "All systems functioning correctly," said his assistant, checking the suit's readings. "Remember to avoid physical contact with the humans." Locke nodded. "Their biology is fascinating but dangerous. Water-based life forms that breathe corrosive gas." He shuddered slightly. "The reports say they're peaceful, but their history suggests otherwise." A soft bell sounded, indicating it was time. Locke and 5 other representatives from different worlds entered the shuttle that would take them to the meeting point. Each alien wore protective gear designed for their specific needs. Earth's Space Command had selected a newly built station in low orbit for the first meeting. As the alien shuttle docked, cameras from every major news network on Earth broadcast the historic moment to billions of humans below. Captain James Reed waited in the station's main hall. He stood tall in his crisp blue uniform, his face showing the calm professionalism that had earned him this assignment. At 45, Reed had gray at his temples and lines around his eyes from years of service. "They're here," his assistant whispered. The airlock doors slid open. Reed watched as 6 strange figures entered the hall. Their protective suits couldn't hide how different they were. Some tall and thin, others short with multiple limbs, all clearly not human. Reed stepped forward and smiled. "On behalf of Earth and all humanity, welcome to our home." His words were translated and broadcast to the aliens through their suits. Ambassador Locke moved to the front of the group and extended a 3-fingered hand in the human gesture they had studied. "The Galactic Council sends greetings to Earth," Locke said, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into English. Reed reached out and shook the ambassador's gloved hand. He noticed the alien's slight hesitation, not understanding that to Locke. This simple contact seemed incredibly brave. "We have much to discuss," Reed said. "We're eager to learn about the galaxy and share our own culture." Locke tilted his head, studying the human. "You show remarkable calm for a species experiencing first contact." Reed smiled again. "We've been hoping to meet our neighbors for generations, though I admit we didn't expect everyone to need protective gear." "That is what fascinates us," Locke replied. "Your world would kill most intelligent species in the galaxy. The conditions you consider normal are extreme by galactic standards." Reed looked surprised. "Really? We thought Earth was pretty average." "Average." One of the other aliens made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. "Your oceans are made of a universal solvent. Your atmosphere is corrosive. Your planet experiences constant geological upheaval. Your biology includes regular cell death and replacement. You sleep, temporarily shutting down consciousness, every day." Reed blinked, processing this information. "I never thought of it that way." "Captain Reed," Locke said, "your species is unique. You evolved on what we classify as a Deathworld, the most extreme we've ever discovered. Yet you stand here, seemingly unaware of how remarkable your very existence is." The cameras captured Reed's expression changing from surprise to pride. Behind him, the blue curve of Earth was visible through the station's large window, the home his people had never realized was special. "Well," Reed said finally, "I guess we have even more to talk about than I thought." The Galactic Council established its embassy on Luna, Earth's moon. The barren, airless surface allowed the aliens to create controlled environments that wouldn't kill them instantly. A massive dome structure gleamed in the lunar valley, filled with various atmospheric chambers to accommodate different species. Inside the human section, Jack Thompson set up the day's exhibits. At 32, Jack had never imagined his anthropology degree would lead to explaining humanity to actual aliens, but here he was, arranging everyday items that apparently terrified the galactic community. "Good morning, Jack," called Mira as she entered. The Phloxian delegate moved gracefully despite her protective suit. Her species resembled tall, blue humanoids with 4 arms and large, sensitive eyes that couldn't handle Earth's harsh sunlight. "Morning, Mira. I've got some interesting cultural items to show you today." Dorn, the Vantar representative, joined them. His squat, rocky form made his protective gear look bulky. "More death rituals?" he asked, his translator making his deep rumbles understandable. Jack laughed. "No, just normal stuff. Food, entertainment, sports, things humans do for fun." He guided them to the first table where several food items were displayed. "This is chocolate. It's a sweet food we enjoy." Mira consulted her device. "It contains theobromine," she said, alarmed. "That's toxic to many species. Not to us in small amounts," Jack explained. "We actually seek out many foods with mild toxins for their flavor." He picked up a bottle next. "This is hot sauce. We put it on food to make it spicy." Dorn's rocky face couldn't show expressions, but his voice sounded confused. "You add pain to your meals intentionally." "It's not exactly pain," Jack said, then reconsidered. "Well, maybe it is, but it's enjoyable pain." The aliens exchanged glances through their visors. Jack moved to the next table. "These are sports equipment. This ball is for football or soccer, depending where you're from." "The purpose is to kick this object?" Mira asked. "Yes, while running. For 90 minutes. 90 minutes of continuous physical exertion. For entertainment." Dorn sounded shocked. Jack picked up boxing gloves next. "And these are for a sport where 2 people hit each other until one can't continue." A third alien, Zerk, who had been quietly observing, stepped back. "You damage each other for pleasure. It's about skill and competition," Jack explained. "Most participants recover fully." "Most?" all 3 aliens asked simultaneously. Jack moved quickly to the next display. "Here's camping gear. Many humans enjoy sleeping outside in nature." Mira's large eyes blinked rapidly, deliberately exposing yourselves to predators, insects, weather, and darkness. "It's relaxing," Jack said with a shrug. "What's this device?" Dorn pointed to a parachute pack. "That's for skydiving. People jump from aircraft and fall through the air before opening that to slow down." The room went silent. Zerk's translator finally broke the quiet. "You throw yourselves from flying vehicles for enjoyment. The free fall feeling is quite thrilling," Jack said, realizing how this sounded. Mira made a note on her device. "Jack, I'm curious. What do humans consider dangerous?" Jack thought for a moment. "Well, we worry about diseases, certain animals, environmental disasters." "So, things that might kill you," Dorn said. "Yes, I suppose. But you voluntarily consume toxins, hit each other, sleep exposed to dangers, and jump from great heights," Mira summarized. Jack nodded slowly. "When you put it that way, we do sound a bit strange." "Not strange," Zerk said, his translator struggling to convey his tone. "Incomprehensible. Your species seeks out the very dangers that would kill most galactic citizens." Jack looked at the everyday items on the tables. He'd never considered how bizarre human recreation might appear to others. "Tomorrow," Mira said, checking her schedule, "you're going to explain something called roller coasters." Jack smiled. "You might want to bring additional medical staff for that presentation." As the aliens moved away, discussing among themselves, Jack overheard Dorn's translated comment. "No wonder they survived a Class 15 world. They don't even recognize danger." Jack just smiled. Tomorrow he'd tell them about bungee jumping. Grand Marshal Orcs paced the gleaming floor of the Galactic Defense Council chamber on the flagship Eternal Vigilance *. His heavy footsteps echoed in the silent room. 6 segmented arms folded behind his armored back as his compound eyes studied the holographic display of Earth. "Play the training footage again," he ordered. His aide, Lieutenant Kaz, tapped the console. The center of the room filled with images of human military exercises. Soldiers ran across muddy terrain carrying heavy packs. Others crawled under barbed wire, while explosions erupted nearby. Marine units practiced underwater maneuvers, holding their breath for minutes at a time. "Remarkable," whispered Admiral Jex from the corner. "They train by almost killing themselves." Oryx nodded. Their entire military doctrine is built around enduring conditions that would be fatal to our forces. The display shifted to show historical battle footage. Humans fighting in scorching deserts, frozen wastelands, dense jungles, and storm-tossed seas. They can fight effectively in almost any environment, Kaz noted, his thin fingers adding notes to his report. Most species require significant life support to operate in even one hostile condition. Humans adapt to them all. Oryx stopped before a detailed anatomical display of a human soldier and their physical capabilities. "Concerning," Kaz replied. "They're not the strongest species we've encountered, but their endurance is unmatched. A human soldier can march for days with minimal rest, function with significant injuries, and survive blood loss that would kill most sentient beings." "What about their psychological profile?" asked Admiral Jex. Kaz brought up a new set of data. "This is where they become truly dangerous. They have a concept called spite." "Explain," Oryx demanded. "They will continue fighting even when victory is impossible, simply to deny their enemy success. They consider the act of resistance itself meaningful, regardless of outcome." The display changed to show ancient human battles. At a place called Thermopylae, 300 soldiers stood against an army of thousands, knowing they would die. At Masada, nearly 1,000 humans chose death over surrender. Admiral Jex moved closer to the display. "These are ancient examples. Surely they've grown more civilized." Kaz brought up modern footage. "Their entertainment, what they consume for pleasure, glorifies last stands and fighting against impossible odds. They call it heroic." Oryx studied the weapon schematics now floating before him. "Their technology. Primitive by our standards," Kaz admitted, "but designed for their harsh world. Their projectile weapons function in dust storms, underwater, extreme heat and cold. They assume adversity as the baseline condition, and their nuclear capabilities. They developed atomic weapons while still fighting with propeller aircraft. Within a century, they created enough warheads to destroy their own planet many times over." Oryx's exoskeleton clicked as he turned to face the council members. "Recommendations." Admiral Jex spoke first. "Containment. Restrict their access to advanced technology. Limit their expansion." "Impossible," Kaz interjected. "They've already detected our quantum communications. Their scientific progress is accelerating. Within decades, they'll develop similar capabilities independently." Oryx considered this information silently. The room waited for his decision. "We face a species," he finally said, "that evolved on a world that should have killed them. They breathe corrosive gas, drink universal solvent, and expose themselves to radiation daily. Their idea of recreation is to simulate danger. Their concept of honor includes fighting to the death." He turned to face the council. "I recommend immediate alliance rather than confrontation. If humans become our enemies, they will never stop fighting. If they become our allies, they will never stop protecting us." The council members murmured among themselves. Admiral Jex looked troubled. "And if they refuse alliance?" Oryx's mandibles clicked in what his species recognized as grim amusement. "Then pray they never unite against us. A species that considers their Deathworld home won't fear our weapons or our worlds. They'll simply adapt and overcome, as they always have." The display changed one final time to show Earth from orbit, a blue jewel in the darkness. Beautiful, deadly, and home to the most dangerous species in the known galaxy. Dr. Helen Miller straightened her white lab coat and checked her notes one last time. The medical conference room in Geneva's International Science Center was prepared for today's exchange, with human medical data displayed on screens around the room. At 48, Helen had spent her career researching human immune response, never imagining she'd be explaining basic human biology to alien doctors. The door slid open as Dr. Zinn entered. The alien physician moved carefully in his protective suit, which had been modified to allow his 4 upper limbs freedom of movement. His species, the Eril, resembled tall insectoids with iridescent exoskeletons visible through his transparent helmet. "Good morning, Dr. Zinn." Helen greeted him with a smile. "Good cycle, Dr. Miller," Zinn replied, his translator converting his clicks and whistles to English. "I've reviewed your preliminary data, but I admit much of it seems impossible." Helen laughed. "That's what I thought when I saw your medical texts. Shall we begin?" She guided him to the first display, showing human cellular structure. "This is a basic human cell. As you can see, we're carbon-based with a water medium for all our biochemical processes." Zinn leaned closer. "You contain over 60% water, a universal solvent as your primary component." "Yes, we're essentially walking water bags," Helen said cheerfully. "Now this display shows our healing process." The screen showed time-lapse footage of a cut healing over several days. Zinn watched in silence as the wound closed and new skin formed. "Your tissue regenerates automatically?" he asked finally. "Of course, don't yours?" "No. Damaged tissue must be replaced artificially. We evolved with rigid exoskeletons. They either remain intact or must be supplemented." Helen nodded and moved to the next display. "This shows our skeletal structure. When bones break, we set them and they heal over time." "Remarkable," Zinn said. "You repair your own internal support structure." He made notes on his device. "And these electrical impulses? That's our nervous system. It sends signals throughout the body using electrical charges. You generate electricity internally." Zinn sounded alarmed. Helen hadn't considered how strange that might seem. "Yes, small amounts. It's how our brain communicates with the rest of our body." She moved to the next display showing the human circulatory system. "This is our blood circulation. The average human has about 5 liters of blood." "And you can lose some without dying?" Zinn asked. "Up to 40% with proper medical treatment. The body replaces it over time." Zinn's upper limbs moved in what Helen had learned was an expression of astonishment. "You regenerate your circulatory fluid?" "Yes, we can even donate blood to each other." Helen pulled up images of blood transfusions. "We have different blood types, but we can transfer blood between compatible humans." "You exchange bodily fluids voluntarily?" Helen realized how this sounded. "It's a medical procedure. We also transplant organs from one human to another." Zinn stepped back. "You remove functioning organs and place them in different bodies. When someone dies, their healthy organs can save others," Helen explained. "Or sometimes people donate non-essential organs while still alive. Your species voluntarily undergoes surgical removal of body parts to save others." Zinn's translator couldn't fully convey his tone, but his body language showed clear amazement. Helen moved to the final display showing human reproduction. "This is human pregnancy. New humans develop inside adult females for approximately 9 months before birth." Zinn studied the images. "The adult survives this process?" "Usually, yes," Helen said, "though maternal mortality still exists." "Dr. Miller," Zinn said after a long silence, "your species should not exist according to our biological understanding. You constantly repair yourselves, generate electricity, replace lost fluids, exchange organs, and grow new humans inside existing ones." Helen smiled. "I suppose we do sound unusual when you put it that way." "Not unusual," Zinn corrected. "Impossible. You violate principles of biology we thought were universal." He gestured at the screens. "Now I understand why Earth is classified as it is. Only a Class 15 Deathworld could produce beings like humans." Helen looked at her own medical data with new eyes. "We're just doing what we need to survive." "That," Zinn said, is precisely what makes your species so remarkable. The emergency alarm blared through the United Nations building in New York. Red lights flashed in the hallways as security personnel rushed diplomats to safety. Inside the main conference room, General Mark Davis stood before a table of world leaders, his weathered face grim beneath his gray crew cut. "The Krell Armada has been detected at the edge of our solar system," he announced, pointing to the large screen behind him. It showed dozens of massive ships moving toward Earth. "According to our alien allies, they're a conquering species that has never been defeated." President Wilson leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Where are our Galactic Council representatives now?" Admiral Taylor, a tall man with dark skin and a close-cropped beard, stepped forward. "They've evacuated, Madam President. All non-human embassy staff left orbit 3 hours ago." "They abandoned us?" asked the Chinese premier, his voice tight with anger. "They believe we have no chance," General Mark said simply. "The Krell have conquered over 50 worlds. No species has successfully resisted them." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had only just joined the galactic community and now faced extinction. "What do we know about these Krell?" asked the Russian president. Admiral Taylor activated a holographic display showing an alien figure. It resembled a humanoid reptile with thick scales and powerful limbs. "The Krell evolved on a Class 3 world with stable environment, minimal tectonic activity, and mild radiation levels," Taylor explained. "They've developed advanced weapons and shields." But he paused, a small smile forming on his face. "They've never fought on a world like Earth. They've never faced a species like us." General Mark nodded. "According to the data we received, the Krell use standard atmospheric combat units. Their troops require breathing apparatus similar to what our allies use when visiting Earth." President Wilson's eyes widened with understanding. "Our world is a weapon." "Exactly," Mark confirmed. "Our gravity is stronger than they're accustomed to. Our oxygen levels are toxic to them. Our bacteria could potentially bypass their immune systems completely." "And us?" the German chancellor asked. "Humans." Admiral Taylor's smile grew wider. "The Krell have never encountered Deathworlders. They expect species to surrender when faced with overwhelming force. They've never fought an enemy that evolved in constant danger." President Wilson stood. "Prepare Defense Plan Omega. Alert all nations. We need every soldier, every weapon, every resource. If these Krell want Earth, they'll have to learn what it means to fight humans on their home turf." Over the next week, the world transformed. Military forces gathered at strategic locations. Civilian evacuation to hardened shelters began worldwide. Scientists worked frantically to develop biological agents that would target Krell physiology. When the first Krell ships entered Earth orbit, they were met not with surrender messages, but with nuclear mines hidden among the satellites. 3 massive warships erupted in flames before they realized they were under attack. The Krell commander, Lord Drax, watched from his flagship as his forward vessels burned. "These primitives dare to resist," he growled, his scales darkening with rage. "Launch all dropships. Crush them quickly." On Earth, General Mark watched the incoming invasion force on radar. Thousands of dropships descending through the atmosphere, heading for major cities. "They're following standard conquest protocol," he told President Wilson over the secure line. "Just as our allies predicted." "Are our troops in position?" she asked. "Yes, Madam President. And the weather forecast is in our favor. A Category 5 hurricane is hitting the East Coast landing zone in approximately 1 hour. Will that affect our forces?" Mark allowed himself a grim smile. "Our Marines have trained in hurricane conditions, Madam President. The Krell have never seen a storm like this." As the first Krell ships broke through the cloud cover, they were immediately buffeted by 175 miles per hour winds. Several smaller craft crashed into each other, falling from the sky in balls of flame. Those that managed to land found no enemy waiting, only howling wind, driving rain, and empty streets. "Where are the humans?" demanded the Krell commander of the 1st Ground Force, struggling to see through the storm in his heavy environmental suit. His question was answered by the first shots from hidden human snipers, perfectly adapted to fighting in the very conditions the Krell found unbearable. The battle for Earth had begun, and the humans were fighting on home ground, a Deathworld that had prepared them for this moment across millions of years of evolution. 1 year after the Krell invasion, Earth looked different. Some cities showed battle scars, but rebuilding efforts were already turning ruins into new structures. In orbit, the wreckage of Krell warships had been cleared away, replaced by an expanded space station, where the Galactic Council now maintained a permanent presence. Commander Vex stood in the Geneva Conference Hall, no longer wearing protective gear. Human medical science had developed temporary genetic modifications, allowing visitors to survive Earth conditions for short periods. He breathed carefully, still not entirely comfortable with the oxygen-rich air burning in his lungs. The hall buzzed with activity as representatives from 80 different species gathered for the official ceremony. Humans moved among aliens of all shapes and sizes, exchanging greetings and sharing stories. On the walls hung pictures of the decisive battles that had turned the tide against the Krell invasion. "Still can't believe it," muttered Trill, now promoted to captain after the events of the past year. "No species has ever defeated the Krell, let alone driven them to surrender." Vex nodded, watching a group of human children giving flowers to a delegation of tentacled beings from the Andromeda galaxy. "The Krell never understood what they were facing," Vex said. "They conquered worlds where life evolved in gentle conditions. They had never encountered a species forged in constant adversity." The room quieted as President Martin took the stage. At 62, Martin had led Earth through its darkest hours. Her face showed new lines of stress, but her eyes remained sharp and determined. "1 year ago," she began, "we faced extinction. The Krell came to conquer what they thought was just another world. They didn't realize that Earth isn't just a planet, it's a training ground." The crowd murmured in agreement. "We've lived our entire existence not knowing we were surviving the unsurvivable," Martin continued. "What the galaxy calls extreme, we call Tuesday." Laughter rippled through the human section of the audience. "But we've learned something too," she said, her voice softening. "We're not invincible, just adaptable. Without the warning from our galactic friends, without the information they provided, our victory would have been much harder, our losses much greater." Martin gestured to the alien representatives. "We now know our place in the galaxy. We are the Deathworlders, the survivors, the species that calls the impossible home. But we are also teachers, protectors, and friends." After the ceremony ended, Vex found General Mark among the crowd. The human commander had become famous across the galaxy for his strategies against the Krell. "Quite a speech," Vex said, extending his hand in the human greeting. Mark shook it firmly. "President Martin has a way with words." "There's something I've been wondering," Vex said as they walked toward the large windows overlooking Lake Geneva. "Did you know? Before we arrived, did you realize what kind of world you evolved on?" Mark smiled, looking out at the blue water reflecting the sunlight, at the mountains in the distance where snows still capped the peaks despite the summer heat. "We had hints," he said. "In our science fiction, alien worlds were always more hospitable than Earth. We imagined planets with stable weather, mild temperatures, predictable patterns. We dreamed of gentle worlds. Yet you thrived here on a planet that should have killed you." "We didn't just thrive," Mark corrected. "We became who we are because of it. Every storm, every earthquake, every challenge shaped us." Vex looked out at the view, seeing Earth through new eyes. The sunshine that carried deadly radiation. The beautiful lake filled with a solvent that dissolved most substances in the galaxy. The very air filled with corrosive gas. "The galactic classification remains," Vex said. "Earth is still designated a Class 15 Deathworld." "Good," Mark replied with a smile. "It's a reminder of who we are, and what we can offer to the galaxy. Where others see danger, we see opportunity. Where others see impossible conditions, we see home. Vex finished for him. Mark nodded, watching a storm gathering on the horizon, the dark clouds promising rain and lightning. To Vex, it looked terrifying. To Mark, it looked like home.